Hi, I'm Katie Russ. I'm professor of economics at the University of California, Davis.
Do you have a favorite experience that you think most shaped your current perspective on economics?
Definitely my experience serving as a senior economist for international trade and finance at the White House Council of Economic Advisors really changed my worldview. And I try to think about how every project I do fits into an overall worldview of how the economy works. When you're making policy, you can't just think about, oh, this paper or this model. You can't take things all as these separate pieces. You have to think about how everything fits together. The White House Council of Economic Advisors puts out the economic report of the president, and part of my job was to help draft the chapter, The Global Economy. That was an interesting experience because in doing so, you have to get it cleared by all the different agencies and things first to make sure you don't say something that will set off a diplomatic incident. But in between that, the White House basically uses you to sit in on lots of different policy processes and listen and make sure that things align with good solid economic principles, and when it doesn't, to speak up. And it's not that economic principles are always going to win out. I mean, sometimes you have human rights principles or public health issue, many different things, but they want that voice there. I also involve a lot more undergraduates and graduate students in my research now. I learned to work with teams while I was at the White House. We had interns, we had junior economists, we had senior economists, we had cabinet members coming together to contribute ideas in a really horizontal way. It just seemed to improve decision making, make the reports more well-rounded. It was a very powerful experience.
Are there any current research projects you're able to share?
I've been doing more research recently on how the rules in trade agreements and the rules that are produced by bodies that help maintain and enforce trade agreements influence our ability to create domestic regulation for, say, consumer privacy, public health, the environment. As a piece of that, been looking in particular at how countries try to regulate information about very important things. For instance, infant feeding choices. The World Health Organization has recommendations for how they feel information should be disseminated to the population. There's an interesting literature on what's called commercial determinants of health, on how private sector interests, how they interact in these rules and making and policy spaces to maybe influence the space for regulation. I've been studying these things lately, and hopefully we'll be rolling out a full paper over the summer.
At what point did you know you wanted to do your research and focus on East Asia, international trade, and macroeconomic outcomes related to global public health?
So international trade, I think I figured out in high school. This social studies teacher recommended that I apply for a scholarship to study in Japan one summer. And so when I did that, that's where I learned about all these economic frictions between the US and Japan that seemed to be centered around trade, international trade. And then on international macro, that I became interested in when I went to Guatemala as a Peace Corps volunteer, because I started seeing the impact of fluctuations in the domestic currency. So there it was the quetzal, and the quetzal weakened against the dollar while I was there. And then the trade and public health issue really came up after I had a baby. I started becoming aware of US policy on some public health issues like breastfeeding and marketing of infant formula, and I became really, really curious. I didn't know a lot about it. I just knew about my own experience as the mother of a premature infant. And I started looking more in detail at US trade policies on different issues. I noticed we had a lot to say on infant formula at the World Trade Organization. Again, it's all public record. You can see it in WTO meeting summaries and so forth. So when I came back, I started looking into it with a team of really fantastic undergraduates. They ended up publishing a paper with me. So that was the beginning, and then I've kept doing research in that space since then because there are just so many questions.
What sets the economics department at UC Davis apart from other economics departments at other universities?
We are an R1 high-powered research university, and we have a nationally ranked program. We also have a nationally ranked undergraduate program. It's not so common that you see a university that's so dedicated to research and public service also invest so heavily in their undergraduate program. I'm really proud of that as an economics department, that our rankings are rising. We're number 22 right now. It's been a collaborative effort, so that's another thing I love about our department. We've worked really closely with the Davis Economics Collective, Women in Economics, URM in Economics, affinity groups to try to improve our program. So we're often doing surveys and focus groups, and students just, they'll come in my office. They're like, why don't we do this? And so we see how we can make that happen. It's just this kind of 360-degree community between students, faculty, alumni, also staff. We have a fantastic advising staff who really goes the extra mile, is a big force behind our rising rankings. So it's a really neat community dedicated to student success. But the other thing I love, just as a scholar, is the intellectual environment here is really unique. We have a degree of intellectual diversity that I've really just never experienced before in another department. People within these field specialties that think about the field in different ways. So if you talk to our macro group, you'll find people that approach macroeconomics in really different ways with different methodologies. The same in some of our applied micro groups. In our international groups, you see people think about trade, about macro. You will see people with different opinions about currency or about trade issues. So I find that really exciting, and it makes it possible for me to just keep learning more every day, to have that sort of intellectual diversity.